if you had told me you could use virtual assistants to run the business, I would have said it doesn't make any sense because it's a tangible asset in a location. How can somebody from the Philippines possibly assist in that process? I was ignorant, just like most people are. So when I started out, I was like flipping houses and I was partnering with people and I was doing a lot of the work. And then ultimately, as I was going, I went back to the 4-hour work week roots.
This is Henry Washington, and you're listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast.
Welcome to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. Are you trying to get out of debt, invest, or just not sure where to start? Then this is the place for you. We discuss different ways to get out of the rat race and build your wealth. Join us on this wild ride to financial freedom.
Hey, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavaggioni, and today's guest is another Mike. It's Mike DeHaan. So, Mike, I am super excited to not only have another Mike on the show, but I'm excited to have you specifically come have a chat with me today about what you're doing. So, welcome to the show.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. I've really been enjoying the episodes I've been listening to with you and excited to bring some value to the listeners here.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the fact that you listened to a couple episodes before coming on as well. Greatly appreciate that, man. So the first question I want to ask you, and you should know this if you've listened, right, is the same question that I ask everybody that comes on this show. And we want to know more about you. So we want to know, who is Mike DeHaan? So can you share your story with us? Tell us a little bit about how you got started, just overall and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess starting at the end first, my main business that I run right now is I have a real estate wholesale investment business that we do at scale around the country, right? So we do it in a bunch of different markets, fully virtual, and that allows me to live like a virtual lifestyle where I can work from everywhere. We travel a lot. It makes it not tied down to the corporate sort of structure, or even like an office building, things like that. And I got that way because I guess growing up, I was almost entirely exposed to the opposite side of that. I grew up pretty traditionally, went to high school, grew up out in Montana, which is like a blue collar town where I was in Bozeman, Montana, which is like a pop-in place now. But when I was growing up, it was very blue collar. And there it was super traditionally minded. You went to high school. Most people, they never even left the town. They went to the local university there. And even still, a lot of people I went to high school with still live there. And you worked up the ranks, you worked like either a trade, you went and you got an office job. That's what you did. So I was one of the few that actually left there. And I went to school at Gonzaga University here in Spokane, Washington, where I'm based out of. And I got an engineering degree, not necessarily because I wanted to be an engineer, but because when I got to school, it was right after the crash. It was 2009 when I started at college. And so it was all about what was going to make me employable. What was I going to be able to do to make money? And that was the focus that was rooted in me after the place that I grew up. So went to Gonzaga, got the engineering degree. I struggled through school the entire time. It was just never for me, even though I was a really good student in high school. I did not like the whole college process and the engineering sort of thing. I was always convinced that once I got into the workforce, I would enjoy that more, which as is not usually the case. Left there, got my first job right away because everywhere was desperate for hiring electrical engineers, which is what I specialized in. So I had medley of job offers, ended up moving out to Seattle. First job I worked out there was at a consulting company that was like, you're selling time. You need to have X amount of billable work per week. You're expected to be in the office for 50 to 60 hours a week. And that's what you did. And so I started on the corporate treadmill there almost right away. Didn't like that job too much, especially because of the culture. So I got what many would consider a bucket list job. After that, I transferred over to Boeing, which is like a big ticket job that a lot of people were trying to get into. And when I got in there, I was very fortunate because it was like a highly competitive job and it instantly bumped up my pay a huge amount, which I thought was great. But actually what that did was that gave me the dreaded golden handcuffs, which I didn't even realize for a couple of years later. So worked at Boeing for a number of years, disliked it, honestly, from the first day that I walked into the office. Like I'll always remember my first day, I was so excited. And I walked to the factory floor. They're making airplanes, all sorts of cool stuff's going on. And then I walked up to the cubicle farm where I was going to work. And it was the most like just soulless, crippling place that you could possibly imagine. And at that moment, I was like, I think I've made a horrible mistake. I wanted that extra pay and that security, right? So I was there for years until finally my wife and I, we decided we wanted to move out of the Seattle area. So we moved back over to Spokane, which is on the east side of Washington. So about 500 miles from Seattle. I had one more engineering job there. And then finally, after that job, that was my third job since leaving college. I was like, this career just isn't for me. I'd been being an engineer for 5 years. So I just said, all I want to know is that I want to not do this anymore. And then as I was sort of trying to figure out my next career path, I read the 4-Hour Workweek. And that sort of got me thinking. I was like, how can I have this lifestyle of having horizontal income, enough passive income that I can live this true, like, virtual lifestyle? Because in that book, he talks about how to actually utilize VAs, how to be more resourceful with your time, and all the different strategies around that. And so I said, I need to figure out how to do this. The last couple of months of work as an engineer, I was like, I want to try and figure this out while I'm working my W-2. And then finally I just said, I can't do this. So I just quit with no real plan and decided that I was going to figure it out for the next little while. And that was, I guess, the very beginning of 2018. So at this moment, almost exactly 5 years ago, which is pretty crazy, actually. But yeah.
Wow. All right, Mike, that is some backstory, man. And bouncing around, I'm sitting here writing down some notes as you're going. You went to school for engineering specifically to make sure you had a degree that would be employable. You didn't want to do the underwater basket weaving thing. So I get that. There's not too many underwater basket weavers. But yeah, so you end up getting that dream job over at Boeing. And then you had mentioned that you didn't realize till a couple of years later that you felt like you had these golden handcuffs. So could you explain that a little bit? What does that mean to you when you say that you had golden handcuffs?
Yeah. And like I said, I really disliked that job from the first day that I walked into it. But the fact that I was making so much money at the time, because at that time I guess when I started that job, I must have been about 25. And on my first job I was making, I think it was $55,000 a year. When I switched over to Boeing, in the course of a couple of weeks, I was all of a sudden making $90,000 a year plus bonuses. So I was making a very strong salary for being in my mid-20s with a job that honestly wasn't very hard. Like, it had a lot of time commitment because it's union based and they force you to do your hours. But like, the actual expectation on output was super low, tons of paid time off, tons of holiday leave and those sort of things. And leaving that, there aren't a lot of better options, like, honestly, going from there in the corporate world. And that was a reason that there's so many miserable people at that company. And like, even if you like talk to anyone else who's ever worked at Boeing, they'll all attest to this. They're like, yeah, everyone there is so unhappy because they have the realization that going somewhere else, you're going to be giving up some of the major perks that you have for working there. And so like, even making the leap of going from there to the third company I worked at in Spokane was super, super hard because everything seemed like a step backwards, because in the corporate world, honestly, it was. And then to leave and go do your own thing was even like a bigger step down from that. But
yeah, I just wanted to point that out for my listeners, because that whole thing about having golden handcuffs is where you're sitting here in a situation where you're stuck in a job that you do not enjoy, but the pay and the benefits, when you weigh them against each other, you say, oh, you know what? I could sacrifice a little bit more of my sanity and happiness because I'm getting paid a little bit more, or I get better benefits or more time off and this and that. I feel like that's a trap that a lot of people get sucked into when they get into a higher paying W-2 job. And they decide, you know what, I'm just going to do the typical thing, invest in my 401k and retire at 65 and live like another 10 or 11 years. And then that'll be my life. But there's so much more to that. And I feel like when you have that enlightenment and you decide to step away and move on into something else like you did, that's definitely something I want to dive a little bit into. Now, you had mentioned after reading the 4-Hour Workweek, how you realized using solutions that the book offered to utilize VAs, to work a virtual business and everything. And that is something you decided to just jump right into. So what was that like to just decide, say, I'm quitting the corporate world and jumping right into my own business? Did you have a plan? What did that look like when you just up and jumped off that boat?
It was about as chaotic as it sounds when you phrase it like that, because honestly,
yes, that's what I was going for.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't honestly have any real plan. So like, my original goal, so let me backtrack a little bit. As I was into my 20s, I got really into strength and fitness sports, and I competed at a high level, both in CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting. And as part of that, I would also coach on the side, mostly because I would get a free gym membership. But then I also discovered like kind of a passion for coaching. And so when I quit my W-2, I guess my engineering job, My original intention was to go and become a physical therapist. I get a physical therapy license because I had seen how people had used that skill to create like virtual businesses and online businesses through online training and all these sort of things. But I needed accreditation to do that legitimately, right? So I spent 6 weeks after I quit my engineering job, going to a community college to get prereqs so I could go and get a PT degree afterwards at a secondary school and working at a PT clinic. After 6 weeks of that, I was like, this is even worse than the engineering job. There's no way I can do this. So I quit that. And at that point, I was honestly at a complete loss of what I was going to do. And my wife and I, we had saved up some money because I did have that high paying job while I was at Boeing. And I guess like my initial iteration of trying to find an escape and have the financial independence was through what most people do that have high paying jobs are like, I'm going to save everything. So we had a relatively high household income for a couple of years and lived off of very little. So I had a nest egg. And we said, I guess I said to her, I was like, I need to find myself. Can we do something? So we decided to go on a trip and we went down and we spent the month traveling around New Zealand. And that actually also reignited my love for travel that we do a lot now. So traveled around there and just connected with a bunch of people. And down there, I connected with several people that also lived virtual lifestyles that were expats from different places and lived there and just had lifestyle businesses. And I met people that did everything from like e-commerce to affiliate marketing to I had one guy that had like a marketing agency, like he did like design and like custom web design and stuff like that for people. So that sort of opened up my eyes to the fact that, I guess, especially talking to a lot of them too, most of them didn't have backgrounds in that. They just figured it out. So that made me think, I guess I don't actually have to have the established skill set to learn how to live this 4-hour work week lifestyle. Because originally when I left, I was like, I'm good at coaching. I'm good at being a trainer. I'm good at helping people on the physical fitness side. So that's what I need to turn into my muse, I guess, as he calls it, in the 4-hour work week. And then after meeting all these people, I decided that wasn't the case. So what happened after we got back from New Zealand, I found myself there. I tried everything you could possibly think of over the next 8 to 10 months. I tried to start a drop shipping company and try to do affiliate marketing, try to write a blog. I actually taught myself how to do basic code, and I worked for a startup for a short period of time before that whole thing popped. I was doing everything. And then ultimately, as I continued to read more and more wealth and business books, that's when real estate came into the picture, because that was the reoccurring theme that I found in everything that talks about passive income and talks about generating wealth on both an amateur and a professional level was real estate. So I said, cool, I guess that's probably something that I could try and focus on.
Yeah, Mike, that's quite amazing. Especially you took that time to find yourself, like you said. And I think one of the important things to point out here is the fact that you and your wife were living on much less than, living way below your means and saving up a lot of money, which gave you that opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to wash my hands of this, walk away and find myself and figure this out. And on that 1 month journey, that's just amazing. When you're telling me about the different people that you met, other people that are living like that digital nomad, virtual business lifestyle, everything from affiliate marketing to, you said some people have clothing brand and stuff, and real estate was the recurring theme, right? Because, most people that are in any type of business, they have to put their money somewhere. Where do they put it? Usually it's real estate. And then the other thing you realize too is like, not nobody, but most of them didn't have like a specific background in that area. They just figured it out. And with you having a degree in engineering, I'm pretty sure you're like, you know what, I could figure some stuff out. And then you just went with it, man. And I think I really appreciate that, because I feel since I retired from the Navy and I'm figuring out things now on the other side of that, I don't have that job that I go to anymore, trying to figure out, okay, what's next for me? It's here, it's now, and I'm just doing it. So I appreciate hearing your side of that and how you just kind of just up and did it. Right. Now, you had mentioned, kind of touched on this a little bit before, about utilizing virtual assistants, right? So now I understand you use VAs for your business. Can you tell me how you set that up, like specifically for your business?
Yeah, I guess to get to the point where VAs were really what was on the radar, I learned the basic real estate fundamentals first. And I originally started, like when I started with real estate, if you had told me you could use virtual assistants to run the business, I would have said it doesn't make any sense because it's a tangible asset in a location. How can somebody from the Philippines possibly assist in that process? I was ignorant, just like most people are. So when I started out, I was like flipping houses and I was partnering with people and I was doing a lot of the work. And then ultimately, as I was going, I went back to the 4-hour work week roots. And I was like, how can we make money with this asset class that I like, with this sort of general business process that I'm learning without having to be there swinging a hammer, without having to be doing like the driving around and doing all the sort of stuff that we're doing. And that's what led me to the wholesaling business model, was because I realized, well, first off, I learned what wholesaling was. And if you don't know what that is, it basically means that you get a contract to buy a property for, say, $100,000. You sell that contract to another investor for, say, $115,000, and you make the $15,000 spread on the middle. So I started going down that path and researching what it would take to do that, learning from different sort of investors and business owners that were operating wholesale businesses that were all virtual. And as we learned the general process, we realized it's actually quite simple to do that without ever having to go to any of the properties. So first off, I guess when we started using virtual assistants, it was me and my business partner, and we started. So when we started our business, our goal was that we would not have an office. We would not be someone that like was tied to this individual location. We did not want to create the situation that we had like attempted to leave.
You didn't want to become the problem.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. As we got into it, we were building the business virtually in mind. So we started right away building systems that were completely reliant on the internet and the ability to tie apps together and all that sort of stuff. And same with like our relationships. We were helped actually by COVID, I think, because people got much more comfortable with virtual relationships than they were prior. Helped by COVID. I don't think people say that super often, but we definitely were. And
you got to look at the bright side of this thing somewhere, right? There has to be some type of silver lining.
Yeah, exactly. So as we were going about it, we were still kind of doing the boots on the ground stuff, but we had a lot of tasks that come along with the wholesaling process, such as managing data, putting together marketing campaigns, doing basic like lead follow-up over the phone, those sort of things. And we were like, let's try to hire someone overseas to do this, because we were also super cost conscious because we were still trying to figure things out. We started with our first foray of just like trying to bring on virtual employees from around the world. We had a few swings and misses to start, as most people do, as we would have people come in and then they would just proceed to do nothing for an entire week. We had a couple of people that would go and they would agree to come on. They would never show up for work. And just is kind of part of the nature of finding those sort of employees. But as we continued with it, we lucked out actually with our first, like I would say, successful employee that we had, who's actually still with us now, almost 3 years later. And he was great because he had a lot of experience with working with overseas people, being a virtual employee for Americans. And he helped us learn how to teach other virtual employees from the Philippines how to do their jobs better. And we still rely on him a lot to that day. And now at this point, we use virtuals for everything in our business, excluding like the hard sales of like closing deals, which even then we would do that. But the problem is that sellers and motivated sellers that we tend to work with, they tend to be slightly sensitive to people that have accents or that don't understand the process super, super well. So we keep that stateside. But we have everything from virtuals that are doing like admin work to we have people on staff that are full-time that are high skill virtual employees. So like we have a graphic designer and a web developer who is very high skill that we pay him on salary. He lives in Romania. He costs us a fraction of what it would cost us to find that person in the United States. We have like our social media strategist. He's from India, and he does like a lot of our sort of overhead social media and marketing work. We have our copywriter who's based out of the Netherlands, and she's part-time with us and works hourly, but is still at a relatively cheaper rate than it would cost when we were doing research to find something like that in the United States. And once you learn how to build general systems and organization, it's shockingly easy to build a business that can be completely virtual, and you avoid all of the overhead that you have to have with having a like brick and mortar business like that.
Yeah, Mike, I absolutely love that because I use VAs myself. As a matter of fact, this podcast will be getting edited by my team of VAs that take care of everything, and everything that's going to go on the social media. My personal virtual assistant, my executive assistant is what I call her now. She'll be taking care of all of that. I think it's just a wonderful thing because even though you're getting something done at a more cost-effective price versus hiring somebody here in the States to do it, that money that you're giving them is worth way more where they're at. I recently took my executive assistant off of Upwork because that's where I was using her from. And now I pay her a salary instead, a monthly salary. And it's just awesome, man. So I can definitely attest to the power of utilizing virtual assistants for sure. So it looks like you use them in almost every single aspect of your business, and except for closing deals, which totally understand that side. But wow, man, like that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So it's also very, like you said, cost effective too. It's saving you guys a lot of money on the back end, and that money goes towards profits.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like we wouldn't have been able to grow as we have if we had in-house people, just because we wouldn't have had as much money to reinvest. And on the note of pay too, it's funny, people, I think American people, they always tend to have a problem with paying someone like $800 or $1,000 a month to do all this admin work. But if you talk to them and you just if you treat them like people, they're always extremely grateful. That's something I find that's really common with people when they're first new to virtual employees, is they treat them like a robot that's like off there doing a thing. Include them in your team, have like conversations with them like a human. That goes a long way, and they will serve you very well. But also too, if you're paying that $800 a month, that $1,000 a month, that is like you said, a legitimately good pay for them. And they can get very far with that. And even with like our high skill people, so like our guy in Romania, we pay him $26,000 a year. Okay. And if I was to find like a full-time, like senior level graphic designer, web developer here, that would cost me 80 to 100 grand on the low end. Okay. I pay this guy $26,000 a year. The average pay, I asked about this, the average pay in his town is about $600 to $700 a month. So he's making $2,000 a month. He's balling right now. He is so stoked on how his life looks. And as a result, he treats us very well. And even better yet, because we have it systematized, I'm not making him stay up through the graveyard shift to work for me. He knows his tasks he has to do. He can work a normal work day on his time. And it almost comes out better because then your business is being worked on 24/7. Like literally while I am sleeping, there are people that are working on my business. They go to bed, I come in, I check everything, reorganize everything, say, cool, this is what we do next. And it is just constantly going. And it frees me up to be productive in my own time without feeling like I need to micromanage the people that are like in my office. So it makes it much like the growth is so much more of a snowball effect when it's happening all the time.
Attention, fellow real estate investors. I know you're tired of ineffective marketing strategies that leave your lead generation feeling like a bust. Well, I've got a great solution for you. I've teamed up with Ballpoint Marketing to bring you a fresh approach to growing your business. With their handwritten direct mail marketing, your business will stand out from the crowd. Their amazing writing machines will craft personalized messages for each of your potential clients, making a lasting impression and increasing the likelihood of them responding to your message. They even make pen smudge marks to add to the authenticity. And for those of you that are driving for dollars, one of their most popular offers are handwritten door hangers. Placed directly on the front door, these door hangers show a potential seller how serious you are. With Ballpoint Marketing, you can trust their marketing strategy will be both effective and unique, just like your real estate business. Use my coupon code AVGJOE for an exclusive discount. Don't miss out on this opportunity to grow your real estate business and generate leads. Click the link in my bio for more. Real estate investors know they're leaving money on the table every time they pass a rundown property and do nothing about it. Deal Machine lets you and your team pin distressed properties, look up the property owner on the spot, and send a personalized postcard to the owner directly from the app, all within a few seconds. You can set up mail on repeat to make sure you won't forget to follow up, and while the app is sending a custom postcard, you can look up the owner's phone number and email instantly. Plus, if you want to find even more off-market deals, you can build a team of people to drive for you. You just get to track how many properties your deal finders add every day, making your deal finding a scalable and profitable process. Go to dealmachine.com and use the code AverageJoe, that's AVGJOE, for 15 marketing credits during your free trial. That's AverageJoe, AVGJOE. Let's get back to today's episode. Yeah, I love that, man. Okay, I want to ask you this then. This is a personal question for me too then. What is it, or what like CRM system or type of organizational system do you use to keep all of this stuff together? I know Slack is definitely one great way for communications, but what kind of other things? Like, do you use HubSpot or anything like that? Monday, Asana? What do you use?
Yeah, so we have a couple different systems for the different teams. Our wholesale sales team is with a CRM called RE Simply, which is a wholesale specific CRM. And we love that over there. And that manages all of our phone calls and text to sellers and KPIs and all that sort of stuff. For the admin side and like for our podcast, we use Asana, super basic on there. And we just pair that with different documents that we all have in a Google Drive as things need to come around. And it's not rocket science. We just set up like the reoccurring automated tasks that refresh every week, every month, whatever it is. They know what needs to be done. And then as we go through and we have new projects that we need to do, we just create all the tasks in there. And then it's very easy to see as things get done.
Yeah. So is that a really good one? Because I was using Trello boards for a long time.
Yeah.
And we were using Trello and like Google Drives because, you can connect them all and everything. I really liked that, but I was looking at switching to something else. So that's why I wanted to ask you that.
Yeah. I like Asana because it's definitely like prettier than Trello, and it's a little bit more robust with a free version of what you can do. And then if you do use the paid version, a lot of the integrations you can do make stuff super simple. So different like payment structures and those sort of things that we do. It's like some of the different avenues that I guess that we've built out within our business. It's very easy to connect Asana with things. Whereas like some of the other ones I found like Trello is quite limited. And then with things like Monday, I found that Monday, regardless of how many times I've played with it, I know it's a really popular one, it always just turns into a spreadsheet, right? And Asana has a little bit more flexibility of whether you want it to be like a Kanban system or listed stuff or calendars or all those sort of things.
Yeah, man, you're selling me. I like it. I'm gonna have to look a little more into it because I just started actually bringing on more coaches for the financial coaching side of Average Joe Finances, and it's
nice.
I'm trying to figure out a good CRM system to use for that specifically. But I think I can tie that in with the podcast and make that all work together. I've looked at it, but I never really went too deep into it. For me, if I can't figure something out, if I'm fiddling with it for 5 minutes, I get a little frustrated and say, okay, I'm wasting my time. I got to go do something else.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll look a little more into it and see how that goes.
Yeah, it's worth a look. It's decent for sure. And we've used it for a couple of years. And one of the things that I like about it too is because it is such a big software is they're constantly doing updates and things like that. And their customer service is really good.
Yeah.
And we've also found with Asana, a lot of people that we bring on different virtuals, they're already familiar with it. So there's no learning curve, which makes a huge deal as well.
Okay. Yeah. All right, man. So I want to ask you something about from the time you started, when you jumped ship and got started in this business to where you are today, what kind of growth have you seen? What does that look like? Like, where did you start and where are you now?
Yeah. So when I quit my job, it's funny, I can get into some granular finances for you. So the last year that I was at my engineering job, our household income between my pay and my wife's pay was about $160,000 for the year, right? That was at the end of 2018. No, sorry, the end of 2017. 2018 was the year that I quit. In 2018, because I left my engineering job, I think I was making 96 there plus bonus. My personal income in 2018 was $15,000, which I got entirely from Uber and from working at the gym, which is doing classes. So my income was $80,000 less than it was. But at the end of that period of time, I started getting into real estate and started flipping houses, and I guess getting interested in flipping houses. 2019, I flipped a couple of houses with partnerships. So 2019, my personal income was $87,000. 2020, we started the wholesale business and we started doing that more full time and doing deals. It took us from when we started our wholesale business in February of 2020, it took us $30,000 of spend before we got our first deal, of which we made $7,500. And that was 6 months time, about 5 months, 6 months. So that was super uncomfortable period of time. We were spending a ton of money and weren't making anything. And then the deal that we wholesale, we made $7,500. I'm pretty sure the people that we bought from, they just vacuumed the carpet and they listed it and they made $85,000. So missed opportunity for us there. So we did that. And then that was end of May that year. And then in October, we had our first 6-figure month. So it basically turned parabolic very quickly as we started to build momentum. So that year I made I made 60,000 at the end of it. And then at the end of 2021, that was our biggest year that we've had to date. And that I made just over 7 figures. It escalated very quickly.
Wow.
And in that period of time, I own 50 doors now, up from 0. And now at the end of 2022, we've done 167 transactions since we started at the beginning of 2020.
Wow, man. Well done. It's funny too, because as you're talking about this, I feel like a lot of people that get started in that first 6 months period, like where you spent $30,000 just to turn around and get $7,500, I feel like a lot of people would just be like, you know what? I'm not doing this no more. This is a waste. But you kept going. But I think what happened is, and I think you realized this as well as you were going, is all that time and effort that you put in during that 6-month period where you weren't getting anything back, it didn't matter. You were making an impression. People were starting to know who you are, right? And you started connecting with the right people, right? And as you're going, maybe some of those people that you reached out to early on that didn't want nothing to do with you back then started reaching back out to you now because you're still around. And that's when you started to really pick up the momentum. I'm just assuming, but I feel like that's a safe assumption.
It is a very safe assumption. And that was one of the reasons we were able to go from taking like $30,000 and 6 months to get our first deal to 4 months after that, having our first 6-figure month. Was because once the momentum was there, you can't stop it, honestly, unless you just get completely, I guess, negligent to everything. And the reason we were able to keep pushing through that, though, is I can always tell that story. We were $30,000 in the hole before I got our first deal. That sounds super tragic, right? Sort of traumatic. But we were focused from the get-go. And so my business partner, he's my best friend from college. He's an ex-Army Ranger, super determined, like okay with discomfort, that sort of stuff. And then me, having competed in fitness sports for so long, the same. And we were very intentional to focus on the lead indicators as opposed to the lag indicators. So as we were spending that money, leads were coming in, we were having conversations, right? So even though we were $30,000 in the hole and we had like literally made no revenue yet, we knew that it was a matter of when, not if. When we got that little bit of money that came back, we just pumped it right back into the business and kept that momentum going. And the thing with wholesaling, and especially like any sort of marketing business, but we do direct mail marketing as our core, it really compounds on itself. And you get the snowball effect that's super huge because as you send out these little tangible pieces of marketing to people, they get into more people's hands than you send it to, right? People share it with each other. It sticks with people because they have something they can hold. They have your logo. They can do research. They can take their time. And after doing that now for years, what still happens is we will get calls from people that we mailed 6 months ago, 7 months ago. And not only that, but like when we continue to send things to the same people, they start to get things from us 5 times, 6 times, 15 times. All of a sudden you get their attention. And so you do it for a longer period of time and your metrics and your lead indicators become like more favorable towards you. And all of a sudden the money, like it becomes inevitable. Like the opportunity becomes inevitable if you just trust the process and you are measuring that it is in fact working.
Yeah, you keep tapping and tapping until you break a hole in that wall, right? It's the way you describe it too. You talked about like when the momentum built up, it's like only so much snow can fall on the mountain before the slightest sound will start that avalanche.
Exactly.
So that's exactly what you did, man. And that's awesome. Mike, this has been an awesome conversation. I think I got a lot of great nuggets out of this, at least for me personally. I'm definitely going to look more into Asana, that's for sure. But I want to transition this into something that we call the final round. It's where I'm going to ask you the same 4 questions I ask everybody that comes on this show. And it puts you more like in a hot seat and we can see how you react to under pressure, which I'm pretty sure I know how that's going to be because you're crushing it, man. So if you're ready to go, we'll get this party started.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so the first question, man, this is a doozy. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made in real estate investing?
Yeah. So the biggest mistake I ever made was when it was actually with the second house that I flipped. And I would say it's the second house I bought to flip, the third house that I sold. And I went into it having just learned a bunch of lessons with the first house. And I've been having a bunch of conversations. I've been doing a bunch of research. And I thought that I was now the smartest guy, right? That I knew how to do everything. So I jumped into this deal and I basically trusted everyone that was involved in the process that was strongly incentivized to have the deal close. So it was brought to me by a wholesaler. They gave me their loan officer who's going to hook me up with a hard money loan. They hooked me up with their inspector. And across those 3 people, everyone said, oh yeah, this is great. But you have a wholesaler who's only going to get paid if the deal closes. You have a lender who's only going to get paid if I use them for the loan. And you have an inspector who wants me, probably gets a kickback from the wholesaler that is going to make sure that I buy the deal so that he keeps getting referred business. And then when I went into it, I found out that it was actually a terrible deal once I got into it. And I did not know what I did not know. I did not know how to do my own due diligence. But because I had walked through it, I'd seen like a lot of problems on my first flip that I was able to overcome. I was like, it can't possibly be worse than that. And anyway, what ultimately ended up happening with that house.
Never say never.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's true. Got way over my skis. It went way over budget. I ended up losing about $25,000.
Wow. Yeah,
So,
that's how it goes, man. That's
yep,
sometimes how the cookie crumbles. And you know what we call that in real estate investing? Education. That's what it is.
totally. And
Getting
that's
your master's
exactly,
degree.
exactly. And it was the best education I've ever had, honestly, because especially because that it put me in such a tough spot. Again, it goes back to the connections. I made super awesome connections with contractors going through it because this house had so many issues that I didn't foresee. I made lots of good connections with different lenders as I was looking to get out of the predatory hard money loan that I was tied into. I made lots of really good connections with realtors as I was looking to try and sell it over various times and just like having those conversations because it was a unique house. And tons of those connections that I made have gone on to make me significantly more money than the $25,000 I lost on that deal. And everything aside, I don't think I would do anything different with that because even though the $25,000 sucks, having that, I guess, initial sort of monkey off your back too, feels pretty good when you can go into it knowing that you've already taken your licks a little bit. Because I think what bites a lot of people is they only have wins for the first while, and then they don't know how to handle it when the hard time finally comes around. But I got that out of the way early.
Yeah. It's like if you're training for a boxing match and all you're doing is punching bags and then you get into the ring and you actually get punched in the face. That's when you really activate that fight or flight and realize what's about to happen to you. That's awesome, Mike. I appreciate that story and that lesson that you learned. But speaking of things that you've learned, that actually ties into the next question. And that is, what is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first started?
Yeah. So something that I've learned now is the value of having a personal brand and reputation. That's a big reason that I started the podcast that I now have, the Collecting Keys podcast, was as we started to grow and we started to try and do larger things in different markets and like scale outside of the Spokane area, it was very difficult to establish relationships in different markets. Because like when I did that here in Spokane, I did it over the course of years, right? So then when we transferred over to wholesaling, I already had different relationships I built. That was fine. But when we go and drop into say like Knoxville, Tennessee, which is the first virtual market we dropped into, I'm now a guy from Washington State that no one knows of. No one has any reason to know who I am or any reason to care. And I'm trying to now do deals down there. It makes it very challenging. But since then, we have started our podcast. I'm working on my personal brand. I'm very involved in national groups. And all of a sudden, we go and drop to a different market and they can see my profile. They can see I have a real estate podcast. They can see that I have an education platform. They can see that we have a successful business. Making connections with good people is so much easier. And I really wish that I had started that when I first started my business, as opposed to waiting until I was 2.5 years in.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely appreciate that answer because it was one of the things like when I first started as well, I had started this blog to talk about my own journey into financial independence, financial freedom, and just financial literacy and learning everything. And then a friend of mine twisted my arm and said, "Hey man, start a podcast. Like podcasts are going to be big. Just do it." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, fine, whatever. I'll do the podcast." And I got to tell you, man, the connections I've made from this podcast have just helped me just overall in my real estate investing, in my businesses, just overall with everything. The connections I've made have just been superior to anything I could get from going out to a bar and trying to meet people. And, "Hey, what's up? You want to talk about investing?" No, shut up.
Exactly.
So you get to meet like-minded people and pick their brain. Like, I love this conversation I had with you, man. This is awesome. And I'm hoping that we'll stay in touch after this. I stay in touch with all my guests, man, because it's just been a great piece of everything that I've been doing with this podcast. And I know you're probably feeling the same way about yours and the connections that you make, man, and the networking opportunities. It's absolutely phenomenal. As a matter of fact, it's one of the topics I'm speaking about at the Real Estate Wealth Builders Conference this May. I'm talking about exactly that, why I think you should have a podcast if you're a real estate investor and how it can help your network. So I think that's awesome, man. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox here because we still have 2 more questions to get through and we're going to go right into the next one. Okay. So the next one is, do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to someone that is just getting started out today?
Yeah. So the number one thing I always tell new people is be prepared to commit and be uncomfortable for 3 to 4 months if you actually want to be successful.
I like that.
And a lot of people, they'll say, "Oh, you got to be consistent. You got to keep at it," which I think is like the good base level. But what does that mean? And I say, try something 100% fully committed to it for 3 months and then assess if it's working. And when I say try for 3 months, find ways to measure, kind of like I said earlier in the show, the lead indicators. So determine how you are going to define what success looks like for whatever you're trying to do. Commit to the process for 3 months. See if you got those results you were expecting. And then if you didn't, then at that point you can look to pivot. But I think the big mistake so many people make is they get shiny object syndrome and they jump around. Or what they do is they keep trying the same thing over and over again, but they don't have a definition of what success actually looks like to them. So they never know if they're actually getting better, and they never actually can figure out what they need to do to grow and be successful.
I really like that, man. Start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it's very cliche that you hear people say, oh, yeah, just stick to it. Just keep going. You're going to get there. But the other piece of that is, while you're sticking to it, while you're doing it, there's a lot of stuff happening around you. And you're just like, man, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. And you start questioning what you're doing and you get very uncomfortable. So I really appreciate that perspective that you gave, Mike, about be prepared to be uncomfortable, right? Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that's super important. So definitely love that, man. Final question, and this is an opinion-based question. And I'm going to preface this with besides your own, because you have a podcast. So besides your own, do you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast, or both?
Yeah. So obviously the 4-Hour Workweek is the one that I have gifted to the most people. That's what Tim Ferriss's question is too, is what's the book that you've gifted to the most people? And it's that one. I really like that book. And then another one that I really enjoy is The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco. It's a similar vein to the 4-Hour Workweek, but I would say it has a little bit more like philosophical views around wealth and like making money, and like how you don't need to be this big, like all consuming sort of powerful thing to be successful. And you can honestly kind of be a nobody if you want to and make legitimate money. And like, it's all about sort of systems and leverage. And the way that he approaches it is different, I guess, from the 4-Hour Workweek, and the way that it is more about like how anyone can do that. Whereas like the 4-Hour Workweek here is exactly how you should do it. So that's always a good one that I like to prefer to people, like to ignite that fire a little bit.
Love that, man. Definitely great recommendations. I appreciate that. Okay. Now, that is it for the final round. You survived. Great job. You're still with us. Now, I do have one more question, and this actually is the most important question of all, because if people that are listening to this episode are enjoying it as much as I am having this conversation with you, they're going to want to know more about you, Mike. So where can people find that? Do you have a website, social media that you could share with us? Tell us about your podcast. We want to see it all.
Yeah. So my own podcast is the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. It is a real estate focused show. We do 3 episodes a week. So we have interviews with people on Mondays. On Wednesdays, we do what we call the Mike and Dan show. My business partner's name is Dan. And we spend a lot of time talking about big business stuff, just real estate in general, what we're working on in our business. We're very transparent about the things that are working for us and those aren't. So lots of good actionable stuff if you want to create a direct to seller business. And then on Fridays, we do what we call a Friday Focus, where ideally we'll get like a question from a listener that we will answer in a long form content in that's Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast. You can go to collectingkeyspodcast.com and get some more information about our podcast there. And then if you want to contact me directly, best place is on Instagram. So it's at Mike_invests, and you can just shoot me a DM on there, and I'm always happy to chat with people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to make sure I have all those links in the show notes to make it easy for our listeners to find them and either click away, copy and paste away, whatever it is they need to do to get in touch with you. Just don't do it while you're driving, okay? That's my little disclaimer there. Now, I want to say again, thank you so much for this conversation, man. This has been absolutely fantastic. I truly enjoyed myself. I truly enjoyed talking with you today. And I also want to say to my listeners, thank you so much for joining me and our special guest, Mike DeHaan, on the Average Joe Finances podcast. Go leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you liked about today's episode with Mike. Aloha from Hawaii, and have a great rest of your day.
So thanks, Mike.
Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.
Thanks for listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast, your source for beating debt, saving money, and investing. Learn more at averagejoefinances.com.